Hello and welcome to this tutorial titled How to Create a Spring Boot Project. So here we are going to create a project that will be totally based on Spring Boot. To start with this tutorial, you need to know basic knowledge of Java and some sort of information about Spring and Spring Boot. So what is Spring? Spring is an enterprise Java framework that lets you create an enterprise Java application. Now you will think like, what is Spring Boot? So Spring Boot makes it easy to create and standalone production grade Spring based application that you can just run. So you can get this definition on this official website, that is spring.io project Spring Boot. So Spring is a very broad project, and Spring Boot is a part of Spring, right? So Spring Boot makes it easy to create standalone production grade Spring based application that you can just run. What is the meaning of just run? It means that in fraction of second you can create a production grade or Spring project and you can just deploy it. So what we are going to learn here, we are going to learn the CRUD operation that we can make using Spring, and we are also going to learn what is service and repository and controllers, right? So how we are going to interact with the data database using Spring Boot, and what are the dependency that we are going to have for connecting with the databases, and how Spring Boot helps you, while you are developing the embedded Tomcat server, the embedded databases, right? So in order to start with the Spring Boot project, you can just go to start.spring.io. So here you will see the one page that says that this is Spring Initializer. So what Spring Initializer do is that it gives you a project, like a startup project, right? Initialized project. You can just start with it. Okay, so we are going to use Maven project, and we are going to use Java language. A version that we are going to use is 2.5.0, and the group ID that I have chosen is that com.demo.spring, and artifact will leave as it is, that is demo, and name as demo. You can just leave these. If you want to change it, you can change according to your convenience. For packaging, we are going to say that we need a jar as a packaging. So we'll see all these dependencies in our pom.xmls, right? And Java version, we are going to use Java 8. So what are the dependency that we are going to have for starting this tutorial is that Spring Web. Spring Web, we require to start the Spring MVC, right? Application using Spring MVC, and it also gives you the embedded Tomcat server. Right. So now what is the Spring Data JPA? Spring Data JPA helps you to connect to the databases. It could be the embedded databases, or your own databases that you have in local machine, or a database that has been deployed on any VM or anywhere that is present and accessible from your machine. Okay, so we have added all these dependencies, and after adding these dependencies, you can just click on generate all, right? So this is going to give you a zip file, and we are going to just unzip it and import it in our editor. In order to add other dependencies, you can go here and search for the dependencies that you are looking for and just select it, and you will get it over here, right? So we don't need Spring Web Service right now, so we are just going to disable it. So now this has been downloaded. So what you need to do, you just need to go to the files, and you need to extract it. After extracting it, what you just import it in your editor, right? We are going to import a Maven project. We have existing Maven project. You just select it and choose the directory where this project has been downloaded. Select it and just click on finish. Okay, so once the your project has been imported in the editor, now we'll have a look what all things we are getting. So the resources file we get, and in the resources file we can pass the properties for to Spring Boot. Some sort of properties, you can just think of like server port you can pass from here, and the database information if you have it outside. Now let's see what are the classes. This is the starter class that we are going to get. This is the main, and we are just going to start the Spring application, and we are going to run it the demo application, this class, and any arguments that you want to pass from the command line will come in this args variable. So now let's see the dependencies that we had added, right? So here are all the dependencies that we had added. So this is the Spring Boot starter parent. Spring Boot starter parent is the you can think of like a global project, like right, Spring is having, right? So this is the parent, and what we really want has been added over here in the dependencies section. We want data JPA, and we want starter web, and we want Derby database, of course, to connect to the database and do the CRUD operation out of that. So yeah, so now let's start the boot Spring Boot server. So how we are going to start this is having a main function, so we can just right click on it, and we can go just click on Java, run as Java application. So once you click on Java, run as Java application, what is going to happen? This is going to start Spring Boot on port 8080. So port 8080 is the default port that has been assigned to Spring Boot applications. So now how we can validate if this Spring Boot is running or not? You can just go to your browser and type localhost and go to port 8080, and you should see that nothing is coming. So we are getting an error page, right? Why we are getting an error page? Because there is no endpoint that has been configured in your Spring Boot application, right? No endpoint has been configured in your Spring Boot application, right? So that is the reason we are getting this error page. Now this is make sure that your Spring application is running and up and running, right? And you just need to configure endpoint, right? In order to configure an endpoint, you just need you will need the controller, right? Let's understand what happens when you start this application. So so when you start this application, some process goes on, right? Those process are like this Spring sets of the default configuration. We can pass the configuration from here, but we haven't passed anything. So this is going to start with default configuration, and this is going to start the Spring application context. It's going to perform the class path scans, right? So why does a class path scans? We will see that. This also starts the Tomcat server, so you can see that this is the Tomcat server that is running on port 8080. Now let's go ahead to add a controller into your Spring Boot application. Now we are going to create a class that we will register as controller. We are calling it greeting controller. Okay, sorry. Okay. Now, in order to register a controller, you are supposed to say that to Spring that this is my controller. And how we are going to say that this is a controller? So in order to do that, you are just going to use REST controller annotation, right? So now when you use REST controller annotation, next time when you run the Spring Boot application, Spring knows that this class is your controller. So now here comes the thing, how we are going to register an endpoint. So in order to register an endpoint, what you need to do is that just create a function called greeting, and this function is going to return hi. Okay, this is going to return hi Spring. Now we know that this class has been registered as a controller, but how we are going to say that this is my endpoint? So in order to do that, we are going to use request mapping annotation that tells Spring that this is a endpoint. So how we are going to configure endpoint is that you pass the argument and say that this is my greeting endpoint. Okay, now let's see if it is working or not. So you will have to restart the server, and once it is up and running, you need to go localhost 8080 and hit this endpoint. Okay, so the server is running now, and we are going to hit the endpoint. Okay, now here comes the output that we have set it over here. So this is going to send the response whatever you have configured in this. Okay, in next tutorial we are going to see how we can create an entity, and how multiple endpoints can be registered, and this is simply the get method, how we can register post method and delete method or put method.